was frying eggs when the kind of pounding started that shakes the whole kitchen. Definitely not a knock, more like someone trying to break in with righteous fury. My dog Max just snorted and stayed curled up by the fire, probably figuring if the place was burning down, I'd let him know. I yanked the skillet off the burner halfway between thinking I'd need a fire extinguisher or a lawyer. But it wasn't a fire. It was Karen Winslow, HOA president, storming up my steps like she was serving a warrant heels, stabbing at the gravel clipboard in hand hat wide enough to blot out the sun. You ever meet someone who can ruin your whole morning before you even get a sip of coffee? That's Karen. She started in before I could even open the screen door. Something about unregistered guests, land misuse, multiple warnings, and an eyesore vehicle spotted by drone near my woodshed. Max barely blinked. Me. I just stood there in my flannel spatula in hand, letting her words pile up like dirty laundry. She gestured at my cabin's paint job like I'd personally offended the property values of the entire county. "You want some eggs?" I asked, mostly because sarcasm is my first language before noon. She called that hostile, but the real show started when the cabin door creaked open and my houseguest shuffled into view. Governor Lane Keller in a bathrobe, hair-wild mug of coffee looking like he hadn't signed a law in weeks. He gave Karen a slow once-over, then looked at me deadpan. "Is this about the moose again?" You could actually see Karen's brain short-circuit eyes bouncing between the governor and me, clipboard shaking like she was about to cite us both for existing. She tried to pull it together, pulled out her phone, maybe thinking a quick photo would untangle whatever dimension she'd fallen into. Keller just sipped his coffee, asked if I was making enough for 3, and Karen finally found her voice, declaring this was a violation of HOA bylaws. Unauthorized guests, the whole playbook. Keller didn't flinch. Last I checked, he said the state of Colorado doesn't need HOA approval for emergency retreat structures built with state funds. Pretty sure I signed that check myself. Silence fell so thick you could hear the birds snickering. Karen, though, she's not the kind to give up easy. She started quoting HOA codes, squinting at imaginary property lines, talking about community harmony and visible standards. Keller let out this big, weary laugh, the kind of laugh that says, "I get paid to handle actual problems, and this ain't one." She tried to throw out HOA charter numbers like they were hand grenades, but I stepped in and told her straight, "Karen, this isn't your land. The cabin sits on state-leased emergency land that borders the county. You know this. You just can't stand that you can't find me." She hissed that she knew a violation when she saw one, but Keller just smiled at me and mouthed the word entitlement. He turned back to Karen, totally calm. "The only breach here is someone interrupting a government-sanctioned retreat." He offered to call the Attorney General if she wanted a second opinion. That rattled her good and proper, but she rallied and threatened to bring the board, the media, the county, the governor's office until Keller cut her off. "Fantastic. Let me know how you explain harassing a sitting governor on restricted state property because you don't like the curtains." Karen stormed off, clipboard bouncing like it was on its last warning. Keller shook his head, muttered, "You weren't kidding about your neighborhood. We both knew she'd be back." HOA presidents don't just walk away after getting embarrassed, especially not Karen. Next morning, sunlight barely warmed the porch before I saw it, an email sent by Karen at 3:00 a.m. Subject line, "Urgent Violation Report." The message rambled about bylaws, attached a blurry drone shot, and finished with a vague threat about state interference. I read it out loud to Keller, who nearly spit his coffee. "You'd think she'd hide after yesterday," he said, shaking his head. "Karen treats embarrassment like an unpaid bill, just ignores it, racks up interest. Didn't take long for her to escalate." A couple hours later, a shiny black SUV rolled up HOA stickers glinting on the doors, and out came Karen in a power suit flanked by 2 board members, her yes-man Brian already scribbling on a legal pad. They marched up like a SWAT team for petty grievances. Karen handed me a cease and desist order, wanted us to vacate, halt all unauthorized activity including unregistered government operations. I almost laughed, but Keller just leaned back and let her hang herself with her own rope. "You're saying this cabin is under HOA control because you can see it from the street?" he asked. Karen insisted visibility equals jurisdiction. Keller said, "Lady, I've worked with mayors and city planners and never needed clearance to brew coffee because a dental hygienist 2 ridges over might glimpse my curtains. Brian handed me an envelope on $1,000 daily fines if we didn't remove all temporary infrastructure. I asked if he meant my picnic table or firewood." Karen went straight to threat mode, emergency injunction, legal action, the whole drama. Keller finally stood up, voice calm but cutting. "This land is state designated for emergency use, protected by law. Your intimidation is a violation of at least 3 statutes. You really want to take that risk?" Karen scoffed. She'd been HOA president 8 years, survived developers, lobbyists, county inspectors. But I cut in. "You're dangerously close to interfering with state operations." That got Brian sweating, and one board member inching toward the SUV. Keller pointed out the press would love to get a quote on this, especially since the governor was trying to pass rural wildfire response legislation inside the cabin she wanted to shut down. Karen went pale, then stormed off again. Keller turned to me. "She's going to escalate. He was right." The press arrived before lunch. The next 72 hours played out like a slow-motion train wreck. Photos of Karen versus the governor hit social media captioned. When the HOA thinks it outranks the state. The board held an emergency meeting, half were missing. The rest looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Karen tried to claim she'd been set up, that the governor should have cleared his visit with her. One quiet dentist on the board finally piped up. "Karen, we don't oversee government retreats. Never have." Even Brian, her right-hand man, was gone, dealing with legal inquiries. Someone mumbled. Meanwhile, I compiled complaints. Turns out Karen had been a menace for years, fining Harold $300 for a mailbox, trespassing on Denise's deck to measure her potted plants, yelling at teenagers for skateboards, photographing barbecues, handing out noise violations for playing guitar after 7 p.m. I sent the whole mess to the governor's assistant, quietly building a case. Regional news picked up the story. Karen made it worse, releasing a wild statement blaming the governor for a smear campaign accusing me of using the cabin as propaganda. She even filed a zoning complaint with the county alleging my cabin's foundation was illegal. The county clerk, Simone, an old friend, called me, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. "Did you know she labeled your chimney aggressive on this permit? Keller said we should turn it into wall art." By then, Karen was the face of petty tyranny meme accounts, late-night jokes, group chats blowing up. The board abandoned her. Even her internal messages leaked, showing she'd known the governor was there. Her exact words, "I don't care if it's the governor or Santa Claus. If it's in visual range, it's under HOA regulation." When I saw that plastered on the news, I winced because I knew what cornered animals do. Sure enough, a hand-delivered letter arrived, Karen demanding I apologize for damaging her public image and accusing me of weaponizing the governor. I used the letter to start my evening fire. Keller's office went full-throttle formal investigation into HOA overreach, copied to the media news vans circling Karen's block. She went from queen bee to a punchline practically overnight. After the dust settled, I got served Karen was suing me for defamation and emotional distress. The complaint read like a rejected soap opera script. Keller just said, "Send it to my legal team. Don't let her scare you. This just helps our case." I felt the weight, but wasn't worried. The system was finally turning. Karen didn't let up. With her board gone, she staged a one-woman press conference on her lawn banner and all ranting about a government conspiracy. 2 bloggers and a confused cat watched. Meanwhile, neighbors began sharing their own stories. Karen's power grabs her endless rules, her tape measure crusades. The cabin became a symbol of resistance. The governor's team drafted a bill unofficially called the Winslow Act to cap HOA presidential terms and require audits of all enforcement actions. Still, I didn't relax. Karen's silence got heavier. Then one morning, 3 county men in suits showed up, measuring, taking photos, muttering about zoning disputes. Another bogus complaint this time through a relative. Simone confirmed that Karen had filed under someone else's name. That crossed a new line: fraud. State investigators moved in. And then the twist nobody saw coming. My cabin was formally registered as a state historic retreat protected by law, immune to HOA interference forever. I didn't cry, but I felt it. Everything Karen tried to tear down, she'd actually helped make stronger. By the time she vanished rumors of Nevada, some say denied entry to a new HOA, our neighborhood had changed. The board held a real election. Helen, a retired teacher, took over first act, suspend all enforcement for a month, rewrite the bylaws. People started laughing again at meetings, suggesting gardens and swing sets instead of threats and tape measures. I went to one, just sat in back, and finally stood up, not to make a speech, just to say, let's make sure we never need another plaque. That was enough. Life found its rhythm. Keller left, but not before leaving a bottle of bourbon for the day we finally shredded Karen's rulebook. Neighbors dropped by with jam t-shirts, even thank you notes. One morning, the new neighbor's toddler chased a butterfly into my yard. His folks apologized. I gave the kid a cookie. Later, they invited me over for barbecue. No mention of bylaws, just weather and dogs. The last of Karen's letters went up in smoke in my fire pit. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just smells like pine and coffee sitting on a porch while the world returns to what it should have been all along. So let me ask you, was I right to stand my ground? What would you have done if your home became ground zero for one woman's crusade? Drop your thoughts below. I have a feeling I'm not the only one with a story about fighting back against the little tyrants of the world.